Once again, I'm very, very excited to be here, especially with Bernard, Tucci, and Doug. We've heard a lot about what Doug does.
Yeah.
And so we want to know what Bernard does, what Tucci does, exactly what you do, and your encounter with Jesus in all that. Tucci, I'll go with you first.
Okay. Let's say my day-to-day job, I head the Ghana Commodity Exchange. It's a regulated institution. So we are set up as a private company, limited by shares. We're owned currently by the government of Ghana. But we're set up to do something similar to what the stock exchange does. So instead of the trading of stocks, we facilitate the trading of commodities. And we started with agricultural commodities. Later, there'll be other commodities listed. What it means to be regulated is that we are governed by rules. And we have the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the kind of overseer, so they are the regulator. We have other regulators looking over our business, like Ghana Standards Authority when it comes to the commodities, Ghana Food and Drugs Board. In fact, we have a host of regulators. The fact that we trade commodities which act as securities, this is like a financial security. So you can say that we're responsible for people's money, and that is not a small thing. So being governed by rules is critical to everything that we do. I won't say too much more. It's just a set of context that every single day we go into the office, we have a very, very big responsibility. And here we're going to be talking about accountability. And if I'm responsible to safeguard people's, let's say, securities, which can be converted to cash, I need to depend on God, who I'm ultimately accountable for. So it's a big daily pressure. Beyond that, I'm a family woman. I love family. I mean, it's central to everything I do. But, you know, Doug shared his story earlier, talking about how God, you know, led him through circumstances to show him that he should always make God first. And God is truly first in my life, not just in what I do within my church. You can say I'm a steward. Whatever I'm asked to do within my church, for my church, I do. But beyond that, my relationship with God is truly relational. So I've played different roles: counseling, communication, being on the pastor search committee, the elders search committee, so many roles, but I'm always ready to do anything for God. So that's a little bit me. Thank you, MFR.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. Truly surprising. Some would say she doesn't look it at all. Well, Bernard, how about you?
Thank you, MFR. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Tucci. So I like the way Joy introduced me. It says, our own Bernard. It means you all know me. So I guess if you're a journalist and you talk every day for 3.5 hours, and you've done that for 20 years, everybody knows you. But they know about what you do. But I'm a single father. I have 5 kids. I'm trying to navigate managing that, which is much tougher than any interview I've had. So, so Tucci sort of introduced her work before the family, but I'm a family guy. They were not even happy I was coming here today. Saturday, where are you going? You know what I'm saying? So people are not happy with you people. So don't be looking so cool there. My kids are not happy I'm here. But look, I'm a radio and TV journalist. I'm also the general manager of the business, but I enjoy more the journalism than the management because of some of the things we'll discuss today. It's much easier to just talk and interview and write, but the proof of all the things you say is now how you lead. So I don't enjoy it because, as he said, it's joy and pain. So the happy part of what I do is what I'm doing now. The painful part of what I do is telling somebody you have to step up, otherwise you're going home, or you can do better in another company, or we are stopping this line of business. It's very difficult, and I don't like it. But I guess that's where I'm growing. So if you leave me, I'll talk forever. So I'll leave it here.
I know. Well, Doug, I would want to find out from you how difficult it's been making God the CEO of the company and making him lead, especially in the environment that you operate? How difficult has it been all this period?
Yeah, so I think that the first part was when God said, I want, Doug, bring me into the business. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I just go to work. You know, it was like an abstract concept. And then so that was probably one of the hardest things, was just praying and walking through it, to finally, over time, he showed me what I just shared this morning, was that it's the call to live with love, it's relational, with excellence, it's measurable, takes stewardship, and then it's biblical truth. And so putting in that in place, and what I've learned is, you know, there's going to be people that like it and don't like it, you know, so you run into challenges like with that. So in the U.S., there's, you know, challenges where we have the EEOC, Equal Opportunity Employment, and so you commission, and you can't hire based on race or religion, etc. And so, you know, but God just brings good people to us, you know, and over time, the more I've sought God, the more talented, the higher caliber the people are. So he's faithful. So it's not going to happen overnight. Some people have overnight stories, but that's the exception, not the rule.
Okay. Well, what is a corrupt environment for you? Because most of the time when you hear corruption, people talk about money, really all the time. They equate it to money. But we were discussing the Afrobarometer a while ago, Bernard, and from 2008 to 2024, the issues or the problems for Ghanaians that was surveyed, it doesn't look like corruption was top 3. Corruption was number 9 from 2008 to 2024. Most of the problems that you talk about is unemployment, you talk about health, you talk about your roads, but corruption always is down there, 10% at least for this year. So I'd want to find out what for you is a corrupt environment. Tucci, would you like to take that first?
Sure. When I think about corruption, I think about anything that is not good. I mean, maybe if we kind of first define it, talking about being put in a position of power, but using it for personal gain. So maybe that's a kind of broad definition. So it's really about serving self rather than, you know, doing what you're set out to do. And you can do this or be corrupt in so many different ways. There's things like dishonesty. If I look at the business environment, there are things like fraud. There are things like favoritism, nepotism, so many areas that we can, you know, look at. Exploitation of power, because I think ultimately being corrupt is really, again, being in a position of power but misusing it in so many different ways. So these are some of the things or some of the words that come out. And I think we experience it on a daily basis. So maybe I can start with one story that I share sometimes. When I first came to Ghana, I grew up in the UK, but I'm 100% Ghanaian, and I came to Ghana around 1999, 2000. I first came on holiday, actually, and I loved it so much I never went back. It's 20-something years now I've been here on a long holiday. But anyway, in my early days here in Ghana, I used to drive. So one day I was driving past Gold House traffic lights, and it was green, and I was going, and just as I was about to get to the traffic light, it turned amber. And I was taught to drive in the UK, and the rules there were that if you're so close to the traffic light when it turns amber, you continue to go. But if you're a bit further back, you can slow down so that you get to stop when the red light hits. So it just turned from green to amber as I was going through the light. So I went through, and then I was followed by a police car. So they stopped me, and I stopped on the side. One came into the car with me and said, okay, give me this. I can't remember the amount he asked. Otherwise, you're going to go and pay this amount in court. Again, I can't remember the amount. It was the old days of the old Ghana city when things were thousands. And I said, oh, it's okay. I'm ready to go and pay, because if I wasn't doing the right thing, I need to own up to that. I said, but I'm truly sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing, because what I understood, at least from the way I was taught, is that if I'm so close, it's better to keep going straight than to do a sharp break, because that's dangerous for the oncoming vehicle. So I sincerely thought I was doing the right thing. But if in this context it was against the law, I'm ready to face up to it, so I'm ready. Are you sure? I don't know how many times he asked me, are you sure? Because if you go to court, you'll be paying this. Or I said, no, I did the wrong thing according to, what you're telling me and the law, so I'm ready to pay. So I was very respectful to him. I said, we can go. Are you sure? Again, maybe this was the 5th time. I said, yes, I'm very sure, because it's not good to not do the right thing, and I'm ready to take accountability. So he got the other car to follow, and he sat with me in the car as I drove to Nima police station. So throughout the journey, he tried a couple more times in different ways to see if I really wanted to spend hours going to, through the courts. And we continued the conversation till we got to the police station. I went inside, met, another police officer who was at the counter. This time it was a woman. She said, oh, my daughter, my sister, why are you here? And I explained what happened. And they tried in different ways to see if I just wanted to, have an easier life and settle. I said, no, really, I did wrong. I'm realizing that, because you're all saying that I shouldn't have driven past, even though I had interpreted it differently. So I must go and face the consequences. I'll do the right thing. In the end, they said, this our daughter, this our sister, you go. And then I left. But the point I want to make is that, when you're in a position of power like that, you're the police, you can genuinely book people, but you're also using it to your personal advantage, to your gain. And this is something which I cannot, I share that. I know it can be difficult sometimes, because you're trying to get on with things. You can have a really busy day ahead of you. Sometimes it is just easier to give them something small and move on.
Yeah.
But I refuse to do it. I can't do it. I don't know if it's the way I'm wired, but I just will not give in to bribes. And if you do that, you will perpetuate this thing on a daily basis. It's a small thing, but that's how the cycle, continues and goes on in life.
I'm sure many are wondering, by that time you had just come from the UK, so maybe the culture did not allow you to pay bribe. 20 years down the line, would you still do that?
20 years down the line, I haven't given 1 peso to a police officer, but I've made friends with many police officers just by being polite and respectful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bernard, corrupt environment for you?
This is a very difficult question. So I don't know whether to answer this from the media perspective or the national perspective, right? So maybe a working definition. This program's theme is a call to love, excellence, and truth. Corruption is where a society does not value truth. A society where people are no longer stewards. Because excellence is stewardship, right?
Yeah.
Which essentially is an environment where there's no love. So for me, an environment where truth is not the standard for living. Truth in 2 ways. Speaking truth, that's honesty to others, and then being truthful to yourself, that's integrity. So when truth is missing, there's corruption. Then when there's no commitment to excellence, if you're a public officer, you hold resources in trust for people. You are a steward of their resources. Now, if you use that for personal gain, that's corruption, right? And if you then abuse process, you are not being true, so you are in a corrupt environment. And therefore, a corrupt environment is an environment without love, because love is the head of all virtues, right? So there's corruption everywhere. There's corruption everywhere. And what makes it even worse is your intro, that even though it's so pervasive, or maybe because it's so pervasive, for the past 16 years, when people are surveyed, they don't even see it as a problem, right? So they think unemployment is their problem. They think the economy is their problem. They don't understand that the culture and the environment which is not truthful, which is not excellent, that's actually the cause of the other problems above. So we have a double challenge where people are in an environment that doesn't promote excellence or love or truth, and they think it's actually normal. And they think that solving those other problems without dealing with the root, because corruption is a root issue. The Bible talks of men with corrupt minds. Yeah. So it takes corrupt minds to produce a corrupt environment. So there's corruption everywhere, right? And it's not even just a Ghana or Africa problem. It just tends to manifest itself in starker ways when leadership is bad. So it's also a leadership problem, because the culture of a place is the behavior its leaders permit. So yes, we work in a corrupt ecosystem, but as Tucci said, there are places and pockets of people who refuse to allow corruption to thrive. So you can have a corrupt banking sector, but there are banks who will be above board. There will be corrupt journalists, but there are journalists who want to live above reproach. So yes, I live in a corrupt environment, but I don't allow corruption to enter me. Okay. Because I'm supposed to allow the light in me to shine outside. So I think this helps us to define it. And it's pervasive, and it's become normalized, which is what has made it more problematic. Because if you don't see it as a problem, you will not even try to solve for it. If you see it as the way things are done here, then you're in a double mess. So that's my issue, that we are in an environment which doesn't value truth, where people are not stewarding resources, and they think it's pretty normal. Okay. That's my issue.
Well, you give us the national perspective to this. I heard Tucci talk about nepotism, favoritism. I may add abuse of power amongst others. You are a manager as well.
Yeah.
From that angle, how then are you honoring God in the face of all that we've talked about in terms of the environment? I'm sure Doug will add to the corrupt environment maybe a few other things that we may have missed. But maybe you'll be thinking about how you're honoring God in that sector for Tucci and yourself, whilst Doug adds to the corrupt environment. Do you want to add anything more to what constitutes a corrupt environment for you? Since you are from a different
I'll share personal experience here. I've been, first trip to Ghana was 2013, second was 2014, and we're doing our first test for God as CEO, but I also got here through a basketball ministry. And so we brought suitcases full of basketballs without air in them. Each kid would get one that attended the camp. So I'm going through customs in the airport. This is the old airport. The new airport's much better, by the way. Old airport. So and then I got bags of books and pens, for the God as CEO event. And the guy's like, I said, what's in this? And I say, basketballs. Oh. And he goes, both? Yes. He goes, that's too many. And he says, you need to pay the lady some money. And I said, so taxes? Is that what you're saying? Mm-hmm. And I couldn't understand all his words because I'm American and his accent. And so I could honestly say, I don't understand. But I knew he was trying to get me to pay money. And so I just held my ground. And I said, if I owe taxes, what is it? I'll pay it, just like Tucci. Yeah. What is it? I'll pay it. And, no, it's the lady. And it was pressure-y, intense. Anybody experience that? Yeah, pressure, intense. I'm American. I'm not from here, so it's a little even more weird. So ultimately, we get through that, and we're walking along. He's helping me with my bags, and then he comes at me again. And says, the lady, you should pay something. And I said, look, and I looked at him, I told him, I don't believe in bribes. And then he's got scared. Oh, no bribe. And so, but then I thought, wait a minute, Doug, you got Christian books. and so I'm going to give him a book about how to manage money God's way. And I did. So I thought, maybe he'll read it and take it to heart. But I've experienced that personally, and I've experienced, so there's pressure for bribe this way, but then we filed, get this, ministry paperwork. We're filing ministry paperwork, and they're asking my manager, how much do I need to add? Mm-hmm. What? And so he calls me, so we're on a cell phone call, and I say, no, we don't do that. But it's just, as you said, Bernard, so pervasive. It's everywhere. And then this is the add to your question, is how else? And Tutsi, you touched on it, is I interviewed a young lady probably 5 years ago to come work for us. And she told me her story, and it was horrible. She had to quit 5 of 7 jobs because the boss wanted sexual favors for her to keep her job or have advancement. And I will tell you, I want to give you hope on that one. In the U.S., 40, 50 years ago, it was very similar. It was rampant. And then in the 70s and 80s, there started being some laws put in place, and it happened. In 86, there was a big case that happened. And since then, sexual harassment, you can get fined. You do not want to get reported for doing that. That's very dangerous. So my hope is in this room or somebody listening online that you're going to raise up and be that standard for God that changes your country's culture.
Well, so we're going into the bit about honoring God in the face of the definitions that you've given that constitute a corrupt environment. And most people have said it's a very lonely road. You will have to stand alone. You've talked about how you stood your grounds not to pay the bribe in the face of wasting of your time and everything. But really, you do a lot of trading at that level for this country, and it constitutes a lot. Tucci, how do you honor God in the face of all that you've seen in that corrupt environment?
Maybe I'll share 2 examples within, institutions I've worked in, because this thing, it shows up in so many different ways. So maybe I'll take a favoritism example. I've trained a lot of people. I've had a lot of mentees throughout the years. And some of them start as employees, but then they end up, becoming a kind of mentee within the workplace. And there have been occasions where I've had to demote a mentee. And if you know anything about mentoring, mentee relationships, you can develop very close relationships with each other. It's a mutual affection, mutual respect. So to get to a point where you really have a fondness for the person, but you have to demote them because if they're not doing the job as they're supposed to do, as the guardian, of the institution, as the chief stewarding officer, again, there are rules and you stand by them. So you're doing them, one, because it's the right thing to do. If anyone else were, not fulfilling their job correctly, they would be demoted or they'd be asked to leave. So just because it happens to be the mentee of the leader doesn't mean they're going to be shown preferential treatment. And I've had to do it once or twice. Actually demoted somebody and let somebody go who I've had a very, very close relationship. So one, I'm doing it because I have a position of responsibility and accountability, but I'm honestly also doing it out of love. People are not going to give feedback to people that they don't care about. And that's one thing I think a lot of people, especially young people, need to learn and to understand. If somebody's taking their time to, walk the road with you, to give you feedback, constructive criticism, they're doing it from a place of love. They want you to improve. They want you to succeed. And I personally, I'm the hardest person on myself. So I'm not going to be harder on anyone than I am on myself. But if we want to set a high standard, especially understanding who it is, I serve God, and there's no standard higher than God's standard. So if you're trying to build yourself up, you need to have people who will be willing to tell you the truth, who are not going to be dishonest or because of other reasons or personal gain allow things to be. So it's from a place of love, and it's also from a place of accountability. So that's one example within the workplace.
But on that example, Tucci, you'd let people go even if they're the ones that brings you the most profit in the company or in the institution?
Yes,
because of the standards that you have?
There's today we talk a lot about sustainability, and it means many different things. But if we're talking about long-term sustainability of an organization, it's the people that are going to, get the business to continue to grow. And if other employees see that someone who is a constant bad seed, who, yes, they may be helping the business today in the short term, bringing some money, but they're destroying people. They're constantly displaying a lack of integrity. They're being dishonest. You have to let them go for the sake of the entire company. And for the sake of everyone else who understands that doing right is the only way to do it. So yes, short-term gain is really nothing. Somebody like that can destroy your business down the line, so you need to balance that profit, and purpose equation, yeah. So maybe afterwards I'll share the other story, but it's really about process.
Maybe briefly you
very
can
quickly.
add that.
I think it can be difficult if you're in an environment which doesn't have policies, which doesn't have rules. Maybe I've benefited greatly from being in, multinational environments which have very strict policies. But when I also went to set up the Ghana Commodity Exchange, I went with that mindset. So we set up policies, procedures, and it makes it harder to dodge when you have that. It doesn't mean it's impossible. There will always be issues. But let's take procurement, for example. This is one area where a lot of people complain about fraud or corruption. If there are clear procurement policies in place, in our institution, for example, there are procurement policies, and there are certain procurements, because of the figure, the limit, I have to be on the evaluation committee because there are thresholds which the head of entity has to be on. But if you see that there's a conflict of interest, the policy also says you should recuse yourself from those procurements. And we've had cases where I've either known, I'm either serving on a board within the industry for which we're trying to procure a service, or it's a service where I know a lot of the vendors because I've been in that industry for years. Media, I've done a lot with a lot of videographers, photographers. So I've sat out of those procurements. And, each of those times, the job has been given to somebody who I don't know. I could have really pledged that if this one had gotten the job, they would have done a better job. And then there was a case where I knew somebody who could have done it. The one who did it didn't do a good job, but I was not going to interfere because the policies are there, they're clear. And because my staff, my team know that, they don't want to do the wrong thing, because if I'm constantly being seen to do the right thing, it does make it harder. So we're building a culture of trust.
Okay.
And Bernard mentioned something about leadership. If they see the leader doing the wrong thing, this is just the wrong place to start.
Well, unlike Doug and Tucci, who are CEOs, at least, they are just reporting to God and maybe the higher authority. But for you, Bernard, you are a manager. You are a public figure. To borrow your own words, you're a very big man. But really, you would have to report to maybe your CEO. Beyond doing the public work, you go back and be a manager, the part that you talk about, which is not your favorite. Reporting to that CEO who may have different values, does not believe in the God that you believe in, and the values that you set out to manage. How then do you deal with it and honor God in that environment?
Wow. So luckily my CEO has the same values.
Thank God.
And I actually think that sometimes the most honest thing to do is to resign if you're in an organization that does not allow you to live out your values.
In this harsh economic condition.
Yeah, so let me qualify that.
Okay.
Look, I'm in a position to do this. You may be in a large company, and it may be very tough for you, but I think if it means enough to you, God will make a way. I know it's very easy for me to say this, but because you asked, there's an alignment in values, all right? I have to take personal responsibility for my decisions. So as a number 2 man in a company, there are certain things within my control. So for those, I have to be accountable to God, to my CEO, and to my staff, and also to the audience, all right? So how do I honor God? I'll give you 2 examples. As I say, I'm 2. I am a journalist first. And journalism's first obligation is to the truth. So forget about management. If what I report is not true, I'm dishonoring God. Journalism's essence is a discipline of verification. This is important because we are in an era where speed comes over accuracy. Everybody wants to break the news.
Yeah.
So an honest journalist may miss the big story because he wants to be accurate.
Yeah.
So now the point is not about putting the news out first or getting the most clicks. Number two, there are topics you would discuss which will not be very popular. So if you're just looking for live views, you want the 6K, 7K, 10K. I've gotten to a stage in my life where those things don't matter. Yes, we need to get audiences. I will not be a slave to the altar of clicks and likes. So number one, I don't have to be first. Number two, I don't have to have the most listeners in the country. Which is strange because you and I know that it's audience that we sell.
Yes.
But I have come to a point in my journalism where I can say, I'm going to discuss this issue. It's not very popular. But sometimes the topic is important for the next generation. In 10 years, based on the mindset will shift. Not because people like it, because the crowd on social media, they are not always reasonable and they are not always logical. So I'm not doing my work for you guys. And I've said this on radio. I'm not just telling you. I've told my listeners that there are some topics I won't discuss. And I don't measure success by how many people call into the show. We've gone past that stage.
Yeah.
Because only things which are solid will last. Only things which are true will last. Not things which are popular. So that's number one. In management, that's very tough. Because there are difficult decisions a company has to take. How do I go about it? Transparency. So for me, even people who've left the company to work for a rival, they can still come to me. People even come and discuss job offers with me, even though they're leaving. Because I can't employ everybody, I just have to be honest and transparent. My ambition is to be like Samuel. He says, I've been with you for 40 years. Whose ox have I taken? And I can say that. I can ask anybody I've worked with, male, female. I'm not a perfect human being, but I can ask that question. Whose ox have I taken? Whose number have I inappropriately taken or texted you? All right? It's tough, but I'm a Christian and I'm living my life in the public domain. So even me, it's not even about law. If you read Matthew 5, a Christian is supposed to be more accurate than even the ordinary society. All right? So it's not even about being lawful. We have to be more excellent than that. It's not very easy. So we may not get the acclaim which we want, because in media, acclaim and following is everything to many people. But if you are surrendered to Christ, you have to sacrifice those so that you will be faithful to the one. Don't forget, he said, it's ministry, evangelism, stewardship, he mentioned discipleship.
Yeah.
Those are the things, all right? And for those of you who are in the public sphere, you have to decide early what is success to you. If you let the mob define your success for you, you will become their slave. Because you need to keep doing fantastic things to have those likes. And I'm delivered from that. I'm delivered from that. So even if I don't have any views, I don't care. And I mean it. I mean it because media is also about shaping minds. It's about nation building. We take the blame for a lot of the corruption. Because it's what we normalize that citizens listen to. Every morning between 7:30 and 8, people on their way to work listen to me. Right? So if I don't live virtuously, then I'm corrupting a whole generation. So those of you in media, in the public sphere, you have to decide very early whose opinion matters, who you are pleasing. Otherwise, you will be successful. But when you look yourself in the mirror, you can't recognize yourself. And I don't want to be that man.
But Bernard, some will also say that as manager, you're also required to grow the company. Maybe individually, that success is not what you're looking for. But your values as against the profitability of the company.
Thank you for that question. We've been very successful as a company.
Okay.
We've been very successful. People make it seem as if you don't cut corners, you can't make it.
Can you?
But we're making it. I mean, God is faithful. We're making it. Yesterday, somebody called me and said he had a program for me to do, and I handed it over to somebody, and that I was going to earn, he mentioned a big amount of money. And I said to somebody that, what determines if I accept the program is not how much you are paying me. It's whether that program aligns with where I'm going. So success is not, I drive a V8, I have a big house, I'm financially independent. Those things are great. But that's not what success is. The company is a going concern. We employ 200 people. We do our best with what we can in this difficult tax environment. That's what we do. Okay. You get it? We will not kill ourselves to look successful.
Okay.
We are a going concern. We are not in the red. We advertise finance, but we don't take a lot of big loans. We are not that highly leveraged because the interest rates are too high. So we grow organically. We don't need a branch in every region to be successful.
Okay.
So we are not in a hurry to show that we are making it. Okay. And God is helping us. That's how we live our lives.
Well, Doug talks about all the figures that we saw. One figure stuck with me, 60 million in the retail and all that. It talks about the profits. But some would say if you were not honoring God the way you were, couldn't you have made much more? Do you agree?
Well, some people want to bargain with God. And so I don't believe in bargaining with God, but I do believe taking steps of faith. And what a session I'm not teaching today or talking about is Stanley Tam, my mentor. Anyway, after hearing his story, I not only do tithes and offerings off of my paycheck out of the company that I'm the earthly owner, right? On top of that, we give minimum 30% of the profit away. Yeah, the most I've given away in a year is 95%. So with doing that, that doesn't guarantee profitability or growth. I've learned, you saw my story, I was disciplined through that big valley, discipline. So I think I was just writing down that we need to focus on not impressing others, but improving ourselves and serving others well.
Okay.
Right? And if we do that, then we're authentically growing with God. We're not trying to play a game or a chess game with God. We're just authentically, and at the end of the day, He has an eternal impact that's much more important than having bigger dollars. And I've been there in my younger years trying to chase numbers and success. It's not as fulfilling. It's not as rich.
Well, Tucci, let me come to the issue about the temptation and the pressure in honoring God and building that God culture and everything that you work with. For you, I would say that maybe the person that appointed you or the government for which you're working for, you need to align with what it is that they want you to do. How do you not bow to that pressure, and how do you resist that temptation?
That's why I love Daniel. I'll bow only to God, because God is the only one who can save you from any difficult situation and who lifts you up. Last year at the God as CEO conference, I shared a few stories, and I shared very briefly my career trajectory. So when I go to platforms, people often ask me, how come you grew so fast in your career? And I shared that, in 15 years, I was promoted on average every 2 years. Sometimes it was yearly. And I shared that this is never, ever anything I attained, for. There was never a point when I said, okay, I'm doing this now, and I want to go to this position next, then I want to become CEO, then I want to become... Never. My head had other plans, but God establishes, our plans and our steps. And I say all this to say, for many, many years, He has been my master. In fact, I stopped. It's not that I don't have my own desires or plans, but I realize that every time God steps in, He does things far greater. When we talked about the career, I say to people who are trying to go up, I say, don't focus on the ladder. Just get on with the job, and God will take you directly up those stairs. So this is it. I was brought in, even the job I'm doing today, I was brought in as, I'm a technocrat. I'm not a politician, first and foremost. And I shared in the intro, my accountability truly is only to God. And I think people respect that. So despite the environment I'm in, where, yes, I have ministries that I work with. We report under the Ministry of Finance. We work with Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Education. But I've somehow developed a reputation. People will talk about me, people I've never met, but you'll go and find out. They say, oh, that lady, she's very strict, apparently. People talk about me, people have heard about me without ever having met me, because I've always stuck to the same standards, which are not necessarily where I want them to be, but I continue to attain to higher standards. And that's really what keeps me going. So even if I'm working within such an environment, I've gotten to a point where even those within the environment respect me for what I bring. At least there's trust, there's transparency. And I think this is what people can go to sleep at night knowing that if they give me their business or they give me anything to look after, I'm going to do the very best with it. I will not lie, I will not be dishonest, I will not steal. And I'm very, very difficult to penetrate. Transparency, in fact, is so important that there's barely a single meeting I will attend that I won't have at least one team member. I have a couple of people here in my team with me, and they will attest to that. I always want, the team present. I want people to hear what is being discussed at all times, so that we're not just, showing people things with our outward actions, but they're with you, on the journey. There is really nothing hidden, and it's a kind of culture that we've tried to create. And when you're working in an industry such as ours, which is regulated, you actually don't have an option. So maybe there are other institutions that will be easier to penetrate, but with ours already, because of the nature, it's difficult. And because of my nature, it's also difficult. But I'm only strong because I'm strong in the Lord. In and of myself, I don't know what I'd do. If I didn't have a relationship with God, I really don't know where I would be, honestly, because life can be tough. Life can be really, really tough, and He is the one that sees us through. So anytime I meet people who don't know God, this is one of my burning pains. I pray for them that they would have a relationship with God, because He's really the only one. So no, it is possible to live in an environment that can be corrupt. But if you have principles and if you safeguard yourselves, because it's not easy, like Bernard said, none of us are perfect. I don't think we'll ever attain perfection. But, I heard Doug say, love is relational. And I want to say something about this, because people these days like to say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual,
Yeah.
And what does that really mean? Okay, religiosity, they take it to mean, okay, I don't necessarily go to church every Sunday, but I have a relationship with God. But what is a relationship with God entail? If anyone is married, if you have a wife or a husband, or you have children, or you have very close relationships, those kind of relationships are sacred. Every single day you want to do better. You want to be there for that person. You put that person above yourself. If it's my husband, I put his needs above mine. I put my children's needs. You're constantly trying to do better. Okay. So those that say, I'm not religious, I'm just spiritual, a lot of them just want to sometimes pick. I don't say there's anything wrong with that, but they want to choose what's okay. All right, I pay my tithes, so I can have extramarital affairs, or it's every single area of your life you want to continue to try to improve. And again, I say this without judgment, because I'm not perfect, none of us are. But the point is that every single area of our lives we have to try to keep on improving. And if we say we have a relationship with God and we know that this is what God wants us to do, this is what God says is right, then we have to pray about those things. We have to work on each and every one of those areas. So it's not transactional. Okay. God, I've done this, so it's okay if I do that. It's not transactional, and I really want us to really think about that, because relationship is every single day trying to do better and trying to improve, but we have to live it as best we can. Okay. And you are your own best or worst example.
Okay. Well, you've heard the saying, when you fight corruption, corruption fights you back. Bernard, I'm sure this is not a new term to you. I'm still on the temptation and the pressure, not bowing to the pressure. how do you deal with the pressure and the temptation? For instance, we are going into an election year. We've seen your other colleagues doing all that the politicians will want them to do. You are saying you will not do. You are sticking your grounds. I'm sure they still put pressure on you, don't they? How do you deal with the pressure?
First thing, I don't want it to appear as though I'm like the only correct journalist. There's a lot of good journalists who are not doing many things.
But we are with you now,
right?
so.
Yeah, so because you are a good journalist.
Thank you.
You ask the hard questions, and you've not soiled yourself, right? So there are lots of us. The important thing is to live it in the public. You know, sometimes people who stand up for truth are afraid. And the other thing, support others. So Manasseh is my friend. He launches a book, we support him.
Yeah.
The truth is that if you want to be, you know, some people can say they are good, but they want to like take all the credit. Sometimes we feed on the work of others, so we share success. Some of the best journalism I've seen has been done by Sahara reporters, and they are a group of people who come together. A lot of good can be done if we don't care who takes the credit. So I just need to put that out there first and foremost, that there's a lot of journalists who are doing great work, even in Ghana, in West Africa. That's point number one. Point number two, what temptation? I think if you live your life in a certain way, people even know who you are. So I don't get as tempted as much as you think. I don't.
Okay.
You know, I don't know. I've always said sometimes I'm standing because maybe I've not received that much temptation because maybe I haven't seen. Some people say they are offered things. Nobody has offered me anything.
They don't? Okay.
Nobody has offered me anything. Maybe they think I have everything. I don't know. So I don't know. I think accountability is key. You know, if you want to be somebody who speaks truth to power, who asks hard questions, who says you want to fight corruption, you have to be truthful yourself. You have to make sure you are living above board. One of the principles of journalism is that we have to be independent from those we cover. So you lose friends. There are many people who I have good working relationship with, but I can't go to their house and I can't go and eat with them. Not because they are bad people. I just have to keep a respectful distance. All right? So it's not even the overt, I won't take a car. It's more the self-regulation of, there's nothing unlawful about it.
Okay.
All right? The problem is in Ghana, we have a lot of laws. But the issue is the ethics of the behavior. You see, having more laws doesn't make more lawful people. It's people who put a restraint on themselves. Do you follow me? So my main problem is not what is lawful and what is not. It's what is lawful but what is not expedient. All right? So places I won't go to, certain conversations I can't have, not because they are sinful, but just because it's inappropriate and it will contaminate my independence. Because see, what I value most in my journalism is credibility. Yeah. And credibility has anchors. One of the anchors is independence. So if a politician comes to my program, I should be able to ask him all the questions in all fairness without being afraid that after asking the question, he will say, but you, only yesterday you and I were sharing this money. Do you understand?
Yes.
So what makes me powerful is my independence. And I have to guard it jealously. So there are so many things that you can do. Let's go to this party. Let's go and talk. Let's go to a football game. Just lose your. It's not sinful. You can do it, and if you are strong, you can do it. But for me, I have my social life is very limited to family, church, and watching Liverpool on TV. I don't have a lot. You know what I'm saying? It's because you cannot be an effective practitioner of what I do if you dalliance with everybody. You just can't do that. And I think, because the other thing is that as you get successful and people start hailing you, you become comfortable. So you become part of the clique. Now, once you become part of that clique, you can't hold them accountable. Yeah. So you always have to have that respective distance. They have to know that this guy, but they respect you. And I'm not proud. It's not like arrogance or anything, right? But there's a certain, so it's more putting a restraint on yourself to give you the power you have to use. So that's the temptation. The temptation to be cozy
with them.
And to be part of the group, that's the temptation I feel. Nobody's offered me a car yet. Nobody's offered me $1 million. Nobody's offered me a house. Nothing like that.
Okay. Doug, maybe you wrap up on there, how you're dealing, staying accountable, and dealing with the temptation and the pressure that comes with honoring God in that corrupt environment.
Yeah, so you have prospective, in our case, prospective franchisees, and they come on board or in the evaluation process, and they want to start dictating, or, I've had even somebody say, hey, get in the real world. And I said, well, if that's the real world, I don't want to be in it. And so I guess I've been out it so long, it's just, I'm in a bubble now. You just don't do that in our culture. So once you can establish a culture, it just becomes normal. And so, but they'll pressure to say, well, there's a waiting period for something, legally. And, even if half the companies don't really follow the waiting period, I'm like, we're following the waiting period because I'm supposed to obey God's law and man's law. And if I don't, God's word says I'm bringing judgment on myself. So I'm just not going to take that risk. So there's temptations I watch. This is in business and outside business where somebody could have opportunity to buy something and not tell the whole truth, so they could buy it, look like it's for their business, but it's personally so they can save taxes. And I don't believe in doing that either. So there's there's little temptations, and then there's the big temptations. So you just got to stay the ground, and it's knowing God's word and applying it in today's terms, and just living it out like everybody is saying here this morning. We got to just live it out, and then others will see that and say, oh, you can really do that. I remember the survey from last year at our event. We had many people say that it was so encouraging to hear living examples of God as CEO. And God as CEO is more of a heart condition than it is a head condition, and that's what we need to live out.
Thank you, Doug. So I would like to thank you so much for being a part of this first panel discussion, Honoring God in a Corrupt Environment. We can still engage after this. Please give a round of applause to our guests once again, Tucci, Bernard, and Doug. We're indeed grateful.